making the slipped garter beanie, which is right here on the loom, which is a type of a slipped garter stitch. This is the version on needles, which is going to be slightly different. Everything doesn't convert exactly from needles to the loom. This is a nice warm beanie and worked up really well on this chunky yarn, and I did a bind off that is a lot closer to a needle knit type bind off where you get that nice flat top. Without further ado, we will make the slipped garter beanie. Everybody always asks about this particular loom. This is no longer available. This was made by Provo Craft, and it's called the Nifty Knitter. It has 48 pegs, and the gauge is 5/8 of an inch. That's how far apart the pegs are from center to center. This is a KB loom that's smaller. However, KB, which is knitting board, has just come out with this loom with the same gauge and same number of pegs, but it will look like this one. So it will be orange, and the pegs will be spaced exactly like this, but it will look like this. And you can get this at the Knitting Board website. I will put that in the link in the description down below. Also, please subscribe if you would like to be notified immediately of new tutorials. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. I am using today, this is Bernat Softy Chunky. There is also a link in the description below for the pattern on my Ravelry page that will list the yarn I used, the loom, and any modifications that I made to the pattern, as well as a link to the original knitting pattern. You do need to know how to do the true knit stitch and the purl stitch for this hat. If you need a longer, slower tutorial, please go to Denise at lumahat.com or her YouTube channel, which is also Lumahat. She has a video entitled The 4 Different Knit Stitches, where she goes over how to do the knit stitch. You can cast on in a number of different ways. I like to go ahead and cast on this way, where I started my slip knot here, and then I'm going to lift this one over. Okay. And I'm going to just tighten it up a little bit. You don't want it too tight. And then I'm going to wrap this one and wrap it again and knit off and pull it tight. Okay, and you're just going to do that all the way around the loom. So whichever way, and you may be someone who knits the other direction, I just happen to knit this way, then cast on and meet me back when you get to the end of this round. This should be done on a loom with a number of pegs divisible by 2 because it is a 2-stitch repeat. I always have people ask me if it can be done on the 41 peg. I never use that loom, and one of the reasons is because it has an odd number of pegs. So if you want to play around and try to see if you can adapt it to an odd number of pegs, that's fine, but I don't do conversions to looms that the stitch is not suitable for. So you can do it on a 48 peg, you could do this on a 36 peg, or any peg, any loom that has a number of pegs divisible by 2. All right, I'm going to mark my loom on this brim because until you get going, for a lot of people, it's difficult to see your knit stitches. And if I happen to be watching a movie or I get distracted and get a phone call and I go, oh, was I going above or below? And I don't remember which peg, and I have to go, okay, knit, purl, to get around to wherever my current place is. This just makes it a little bit easier so that you know, okay, I'm going below, 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 below. Whereas if you're doing E-wrap, what I do is I E-wrap and then I purl, and then I go back and lift off all my E-wraps. That way I know which peg I'm purling, and I don't have to worry about keeping track all the time. So this way I just marked all my purl pegs. These are just rainbow loom rubber bands. I got these, I think, for 99 cents on sale one time at Michael's. I think they're at Michael's regular price is about $3 for 500 or 600. That's in the US. I know you people in Canada, your stuff is a lot more expensive. So I don't know what it is there, but in the U.S. you can get these for $3. Michael's typically always has a coupon for one item for either 40 or 50% off. So if they're $3, I just looked them up. Then at 40% off, they would be $1.80, I think, for 500 or 600 of them. This is the Knitting Board KB loom hook. This is, I think, about $2.50 or $2.99 or something. Usually at Joann's is the place that I think I've seen it the cheapest. I love this ergonomic handle. I have no cartilage here in my thumb, and I have a lot of arthritis in my hands and my fingers in general. And this makes it really nice and comfortable. This color, by the way, of Softy Chunky by Bernat is called Gray, and it's G-R-E-Y, rag, R-A-G-G, I believe. I put in all my yarn in my stash into my Ravelry stash. So Ravelry allows you to input all the yarn you currently have in your inventory or your stash, what color it is, what brand it is, and then you can even grab a photo off the internet so that you can later say, oh, what was the color of this yarn? And I can go back to my Ravelry page and I can see what color yarn. Oh yeah, this was Bernat Softy Chunky, and it's called Gray Rag. I highly recommend it. I have a video that I will post a link in the description below on how to use Ravelry and how to use it for your projects in your stash. And if you are someone who intends on doing your projects over or you want to refer back to them, I highly recommend using Ravelry. I'm a super organized person and I like having all my stuff organized on Ravelry. So for this hat has a 1x1 rib stitch. What does that mean? Well, that means this is one knit, one purl, one knit, one purl, one knit, one purl. So we're alternating the stitches all the way around the hat. You can have a 2x2 ribbing, which would be 2 knits, 2 purls. You can have any combination of rib stitch that you want. So because the top of the hat is done in true knit stitch, I want to also do the brim in true knit stitch. This is because if you did the brim in E-wrap stitch, the brim would be really big and then the top of the hat would be smaller and you would end up with a bell-shaped hat. So you always want your brim to be the same or sometimes even tighter than the top of the hat, depending on whether you want a tight beanie or a slouchy hat. So that is why we are using the true knit stitch. If you need a slower version of this technique, you can click down at the bottom on YouTube. There is the ability to make this video go at half speed. I believe even 0.25, 0.75, 0.5, and 0.25 speed, I believe, at the bottom. Also, if you go to Denise at lumahat.com, she can show you how to do all these stitches nice and slow. So I'm going to lay my working yarn on top of my first peg, which is my knit peg. This is my first peg here. This is the reverse of a purl, okay? So I'm going to go, oops. So I'm going to go below the stitch that's on there, grab that yarn, pull it through, okay? Lift it up off the peg and replace it, and then I'm going to tighten it up in the back, okay? Then my next stitch is going to be opposite that. It's going to be a purl. If you need slower video on a purl, it's just the opposite. So I'm diving down from the top, and each time I'm tightening my stitch. This one, I'm going up and I'm pulling it down through, okay? This is going to give you a little tighter stitch than the E-wrap. So we're just alternating knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl all the way around. And you're going to repeat that until your brim gets whatever length you want it to be. I like my brims to be about 1.5 to maybe 2 inches. Let's see what this one is. This one is about 1 3/4. So somewhere between 1.5 to 2. I usually don't go more than 2 unless I'm doing a specialized brim. So you're going to continue with 1 knit, 1 purl, 1 knit, 1 purl for however long you want your brim to be, and then meet me back here and we will start the body of the hat. So I've finished the brim on my hat, and this is about the length that I like my hats. You may want yours a little bit less or possibly a little bit more. So when you get your brim to the length that you want it, The very first row in this pattern is to knit every stitch. So just like the ribbing, we are going to do a true knit stitch, okay? So you're going to go all the way around the loom, and I'll show you this again, but we're going to knit the entire row. Okay. Just like that. And I would go ahead and leave your stitch markers because they may come in handy a little bit later. Okay, so I did one round of the true knit stitch, and row 2 is simply purl all the way around the loom. So simply purl all the way around your loom, and meet me back up when you're done with that. For row 3, we're simply going to slip or skip one with the yarn in back and knit one. So for the first peg here, all you're going to do is lay your yarn in back, and then once again, using the true knit stitch, I'm going to knit peg number 2. And that's why I said leave your stitch markers on there. So we're just going to leave it behind that peg, and then we're going to knit the next peg. Okay. So slip or skip one with the yarn in back, knit the next peg. Okay, so we're just laying the yarn behind this peg right here, and then going in front of this peg and knitting with the true knit stitch. Okay, so you can see this yarn is just now, it's laying behind first peg, at the next peg, it's laying, see, this is my yarn right here, I'll lay back here. So part of the problem if you were to use an E-wrap, and I know people are going to say, oh, well, can I just E-wrap this? You could, but these floats are going to be really loose. I know because I tested this pattern. The pattern will look completely different, as the E-wrap is a twisted knit stitch or knitting through the back loop. It is not the same as a regular knit stitch. So we're just going behind this peg, okay? And then we're knitting the next peg. Okay. And then you're going to continue to do that all the way around, and meet me back when you're done. Now that we finished that row, the next row will be slip or skip one and purl one. So instead of putting the yarn on top, you're just doing the same thing. You're putting the yarn behind the peg, but this time we're going to do a purl stitch. Okay. So yarn behind this peg, down to the next peg, and purl. Okay. Meet me back up when you finish that row. So we finished that row, and the next row we're going to repeat knit all the way around and purl all the way around. So for the next round we are simply going to knit all the pegs. So we're going to do the true knit stitch again. So throughout this whole project we are doing the true knit stitch. So we're going to do another round of knit and then followed by another round of purl. So we're just going to knit every stitch in this row, exactly like we did the first row. All right, so knit all your stitches and meet me back, and we'll be ready to purl the next round. So we finished that round. So for round 6, we are simply going to purl every peg. So you're just going to purl every peg around, just like we did in round 2. So you're just repeating rounds 1 and 2 here, and then meet me back here. Now we're down to the last round. So in round 3, you'll remember we did a slip or skip and a knit. So this time we are going to do the opposite. We are going to knit one with the true knit stitch. And then we are going to skip or slip one, laying the yarn behind that peg, and then we're going to knit the next peg in the true knit stitch. Okay, and you're going to do that all the way around the loom and meet me back. We finished up that row. The last row in this stitch repeat is going to be purl one, slip one. So before we did slip one, purl one. So in this one, your last peg is a slip. So you're just going to bring it behind that peg, and then we're going to start out with a purl one on this last round, on round 8. So you're going to purl one and then slip one. So you're going to place it behind the peg. That's all we're doing, is placing the yarn behind the peg. And then we're going to purl the next peg. Okay, just like that. Slip one, purl one. And once we finish this round, we're going to repeat. You'll start back at the beginning of row 1, and you will have that 8 row repeat for however long you would like to make your hat. Okay, so finish up this row and meet me back. It depends if you want to make a slouchy hat or a beanie. I tend to like beanies better, which are about 8 inches total. A slouchy hat is usually 9 to 10 inches. Maybe some people might even make them longer. So I'm going to do the bind off a little differently on this hat. So when you finish your rows, you want to leave enough room to do 6 rows for the bind off. Okay, I'm doing more of a traditional, this is knitted with needles, okay, this is not on the loom. However, there is a bind off on the loom that hopefully will give us a similar look to this hat. So you will have this nice pattern up to here, and then we will have this nice flat star type shaped crown for the bind off. I'm using the Game Day hat from Good Knit Kisses, which is Kristen Mangus, and the bind off, she has a video for that bind off, but I will also do it here. So you can look at her video if you prefer hers, if mine doesn't work for you, but that is the bind off we will use. So go ahead and do however many rounds you want according to the length you want your hat to be, and meet me back for the bind off. So I've got my hat to the length that I want it for my particular beanie. And I'm going to get a measuring tape right here. And it's about maybe 7.5, 7 3/4 or so in length. And I think I need 3/4 to an inch for this particular bind off, because this will be 6 rows. So this is the bind off from Kristen Mangus at Good Knit Kisses, and it is her Stadium Stripes Game Day hat. Okay, so since we've been using the true knit stitch, we're going to continue with that same stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit 4, knit 2 together. I'll show you what that looks like. So we're going to knit these 4 pegs. And I believe she does this working in the clockwise direction. So if you loom knit the other direction and you want to see it, I believe she does it in her videos in both directions. Okay. We knit 1, 2, 3, 4 pegs. Now we're going to take stitch from peg 5 and we're going to place it over on peg 6. And I ended this round on a purl round. So I believe I got a complete round of the 8 stitches. If not, I would say you need to at least end on a purl round. Okay, so we've knit these 4. We took 5, put it on top of 6. Now we're just going to take the yarn behind peg 5, the empty peg, and we're going to knit these two together with the true knit stitch exactly as we have been doing, okay? Okay, now, same thing again. We're going to knit 4 stitches. 1, 2. Like I said, there is a slow motion feature in YouTube where you can slow the video down at the right hand corner, right in the video. Right down here, you should have a button that says speed if you need this in slower time. Okay, so once again, we've knit 1, 2, 3, 4 pegs. We're going to take peg 5, just lift it up, place it over on peg 6. The yarn now goes behind the empty peg, and then we're going to do the true knit stitch again right here. Okay, all right, you will continue that all the way around the loom, knit 4, take peg 5, put it on peg 6, knit those two together, and meet me back when you get finished. Okay, so for the second round of the bind off, you're simply going to go around and do the true knit stitch on all of the pegs that have a loop. You are not going to do anything with the skipped pegs, okay? So we're just going to do the true knit stitch all the way around on each peg that has a loop on it. And for the pegs that don't have a loop, you're just going to lay the yarn behind that peg. Okay, so we're gonna knit this one, and then you're just going to go behind this peg just like you did before and knit this one, and continue knitting each peg that has a stitch on it around and meet me back. On round 3, we're going to knit the first 3 stitches. So I'm going to go 1. We're going to move some stitches around on this round of decreases. 2, 3. Okay. So see how we have this empty peg here? We're going to take these 2 stitches and put them on this peg. So we simply want to put one stitch here. See if I can pick this one up and put it over here. Let's see. Okay, so I moved this stitch over. I had to do it off camera because this one was a little bit tighter, and so I had to use a little more muscle to do it. So once again, you're just going to go behind the empty peg, and we are going to once again knit these 2 together. Okay, I'm going to continue around 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and then move these 2 stitches together to this empty peg. Okay. It might be a little tight, but you should be able to do it. Okay. Move that one over. And I'm going to move this one over to this peg. Okay. And then I'm going to knit these 2 together. So you're going to continue in that way all the way around, knitting 3, and then moving these 2 to this empty peg, and meet me back. So when you get finished with that round, you're simply going to, when you get finished with that round, that decrease round, you are simply now going to knit all the stitches that are on the peg. So in other words, you're going to knit only the pegs with stitches on them, placing the yarn behind the empty pegs. Go all the way around, knit every peg that has a stitch on it, skipping the empty pegs, and meet me back for the next decrease round. For this last round, this decrease row, I have to have my notes for this one because I have not done this one. We are going to knit these 2 pegs. Okay, so we're going to knit 1 and knit 2, and we're going to be moving some stitches around. Okay, we're going to move peg 3 to this empty peg. We're going to peg 3 over to peg 4. Okay, and then we're going to move peg 2, which we've already worked, over to peg 3. We got to tighten this up because we already worked it, so that one's really loose. So we moved 2 to 3, and then now we're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4 to peg 5. So we're going to move this stitch all the way over to the 5th peg, where you're going to have 2 stitches. Once again, we're going to go behind this peg, and then we're going to knit these 2 together. Okay. Now we have these stitches spaced out. See, I have a stitch and an empty peg, a stitch and empty peg. All right, let's try this again. I'm going to knit 2 stitches. And then we're going to move 3 to 4 and 2 to 3. And then ultimately we're going to move peg 4 over to peg 5, and we're going to knit those 2 stitches together. Okay, and then we're just going to keep repeating this so that we have a stitch, an empty peg, a stitch, an empty peg. Repeat this all the way around and meet me back. When you've completed the last round of decreases, you are simply going to go around, place the yarn behind the empty pegs, and we are going to knit every other peg that has a stitch on it. So just like before, we're going to knit 1, slipping 1 behind, going to knit 1, slip the yarn behind the peg. Do that all the way around and meet me back. We're now ready to take it off the loom. I'm going to wrap my yarn around my loom. I'm just going to go about 1 and a little bit more, 1 time around and a little bit more. You shouldn't need a whole lot more than that. We're going to get our tapestry needle and take it off the loom. Simply just going to thread your yarn through any tapestry needle you have, and we are going to go through the first stitch, pull it all the way through, and take off this stitch. And we're just going to do that all the way around the loom. Go through stitch number 2, pull it through, and take it off. And just do that all the way around. So all you have to do now that you have it pulled off the loom is pull this tight, cinch this up, and you have this nice shaped crown. So I'm going to, before I pull that completely tight, put this through the bottom, and then of course we want to come through to the underside and pull it nice and tight. And then of course you always want to stitch through your stitches around the circle. And all you have to do when you cinch it is you want to thread your tail through these loops so that it is cinched up nice and tight and it doesn't come apart. And you have a beanie with this nice crown shape on the top that looks almost like a knit hat. And I think that's just really, really pretty and looks really nice.